We had a fabulous time at the Walkworthy Men's Conference. If you're just tuning in, we've been hearing your reflections, which you're welcome to call or text, 440-546-2255. The most impactful thing for me was sifting through over 178 questions that came in from men on the topic of you've got issues. Men said, yeah, we do. I know they do. I told them because I've got issues that I'd love to get help with, but we don't have many places to get help, to be honest. I mean, that was one of the big takeaways for me is men are frustrated. There's nowhere for us to take our real issues where we can feel safe. And in this case, we had three pastors ready to answer questions that came up in our panel. And I mentioned before the break, somebody from one of my friends at Moody plugged all the questions into ChatGPT and asked for some analysis. About 1 in 4 men in attendance. I know ladies are listening to this with bated breath because a lot of them sent men in their lives there. 1 in 4 men are struggling with marriage and relationships. 1 in 4 men are struggling in their marriages. Now, as ChatGPT read through all of the many questions, dozens of questions about marriage and relationship issues, it said the most common struggles, marriage dissatisfaction, communication breakdown, affairs, and the challenge of being a godly husband. Notable insights after ChatGPT analyzed all the questions about marriage and relationships. Many husbands feel disconnected to their wives emotionally and spiritually, with concerns about romance fading and how to lead their families biblically. I know you're the only lady here, Daria, but how do you process that summary? Many husbands feel disconnected from their wives emotionally and spiritually, with concerns of romance fading.
It's a heartbreaker. And I think if husbands and wives were honest with each other, they might find they both feel the same way. So it's extra heartbreaking that I think they both assume it's happening in a vacuum and just to them, when maybe their partner feels the exact same way.
Yeah. I feel like I have to share some of these questions too, because some women are going, what do you mean? I hope my fill in the blank wasn't one of those men asking one of those questions. And since they were anonymous, I feel confident sharing this because this will be published online as well and all that. How about this one? When the romance in your marriage is flat and your spouse spends more time with the kids than you, she doesn't see anything wrong. You're getting more attention from others than her. How do you overcome not yielding into temptation? So you've got a guy who feels kind of ignored by his wife. And she spends more time with the kids than him. And when he brings it up, she doesn't see anything wrong. And he's getting more attention from people outside of his home than in his marriage. That is devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's real.
Totally real. I am so blessed by the man who had courage to write this down, because this is one of the questions I asked our panel to get a response from. And almost every time I'd ask a question, I watched all three pastors. They'd grimace because they've heard this before and they know the pain of it.
Yeah, and I think, though, that it's not just the wife. It's human nature to brush off others' concerns as, well, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Because it's not that big of a deal to me, it shouldn't be that big of a deal to you, and that's not a good way to deal with things, because you're pushing someone away when you say something like that.
Yeah, and I think what's more common is hearing Christian women express dissatisfaction with their marriage relationship. We don't often, and men feeling bad about it.
Yeah.
We don't often hear men saying, actually, I'm pretty unhappy too.
Yeah. I think that's just because women are more vocal about that sort of thing. We as men will, suffer in silence. We don't want to, we're embarrassed or maybe not feel as manly or whatever if you admit that sort of thing to yourself, much less to somebody else.
How about this one? After 22 years of marriage, my wife no longer feels in love with me. We're both saved and raised in the church. How can I understand God's plan and cope in this situation?
That's brutal.
Yeah. And again, 1 in 4 men came in with questions like that. We pulled out a couple of highlights that represent many of the other questions. And then here's one I didn't ask in the panel that I wanted to bring up here. If you could only give one point of biblical wisdom to any struggling marriage, what would it be? And I would answer a different question.
Yeah.
I would say one point of wisdom born out of following Christ and reading the scriptures. And it's get marriage counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every one of these questions that were asked, the pastors pointed out, you need to get help. But in this case, if your marriage is like this, I know you feel like a failure going to marriage counseling. You are not. You are courageous.
Right, because these are there is no one answer. This is what you need to do.
Yeah, there's no verse for this.
To issues like that. Those are deep issues that are complicated and long term. You don't just wake up one day and be unconcerned with your spouse's feelings. You work into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to the gentleman in a previous question who says she doesn't see anything wrong, well, then you need to go to her and say, well, there is something wrong, and I'd like to go to counseling. Will you go with me?
Yeah. Can we get someone else's opinion, someone who isn't invested in this, who's someone who doesn't have something to lose or gain?
Yeah, and it's great advice. 1 in 4 men at the conference are struggling with marriage and relationships. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope it's a convicting thing for everyone listening to do a marriage checkup, but also to any ministry leaders listening, whether it's lay leaders or pastors. There's some work to be done, because men also mention, and we'll go into this later, but men are frustrated. They don't feel safe opening up.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel like they have a place to express their concerns.
Yeah.
And this was a theme that came up in the questions. So we've got men who are suffering in their marriages that are falling apart. They feel like they are. And they don't feel like they have anywhere to go to get help or share their concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them, their wives aren't listening. That's heartbreaking. And we've got work to do as a church. And I'm grateful for the Walkworthy Men's Conference and for the 3 pastors who joined us who were able to at least begin to scratch the surface of this need for men in our community. And I'm grateful to God that giving us this window into men's souls in our area, because this can guide us in months ahead as to issues that we can cover here on this show. And I intend to do that. I've already forwarded this to Lauren as she sets topics for us to say, we got a lot to cover here in the coming months to help minister to men in our community. I'm so glad you're here today, and we are just celebrating what the Lord did at the Walkworthy Men's Conference this last weekend at Canton Baptist Temple, featuring Dr. Paul Cannings, Pastor Mike Frazier, Pastor Rodney Maiden. Well over 1,500 men across the country, literally across the country, whether in person at Canton Baptist Temple or online, participated, and it was fabulous. The high point for me was the panel discussion. We've been kind of going through some analysis of all 178 questions that came in. Men really do have issues. I mean, I know I have issues, and I talk about them on the air, and I was hoping that would motivate men to share their issues as well, and they got them. And I'm convicted that there's much work to do in the church here, in our area at least, to support men effectively in the Christian faith.
Yeah, I think that's a national issue as well, and and we can't just keep the issue on men's side. We're talking about it as far as men go because of the Walkworthy Conference.
Yeah,
but it's not that women don't have similar issues, but the fact that men have them and are voicing them, at least in this way, it does indicate, like you said, that the church has work to do. We need to address real issues and from the pulpit as well.
I'm wondering if this is a bigger issue within the church than outside our walls. Because I'm wondering if men in the church just feel this extra pressure because the Bible is very explicit with, how a man is supposed to lead his wife and his children, his household, that people that are not Christians, they don't have that pressure. For them, the gender roles are a little bit more fluid. So I'm wondering if men are feeling, Christian men specifically, are just feeling this extra pressure. They don't know what to deal with it, what to do with it. And they feel like, I need to deal with it, or I'm a weak Christian or something, and I don't know where to get help.
Mm-hmm.
Very insightful. I think you're right. And I think, honestly, one of the more challenging admonitions for men in Ephesians 5 is that we're supposed to love our wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for it, a sacrificial love.
Right.
And I think sometimes men interpret that poorly, as in you need to just take whatever you've got. Like if your wife is ignoring you or being rude to you, like you just have to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, there's a sense in which you do, but you also can be empowered to bring about change in your relationship.
Right. Because love is action.
Yeah.
And whether you're being loved or feeling you're being loved, or whether you don't feel you're being loved, your reaction should be the action of love.
Amen. Now, we're asking for your reflections. Those of you who went to Walkworthy Men's Conference, guys, call or text with your reflections, 440-546-2255. Daria, we had a couple of men text in here. Can you share one of those with us?
Yeah, someone said the conference was amazing. I haven't been to one in a while, especially loved the discussion panel, and my question even got asked. This conference has given me the confidence to do what God has called me to do. Can't wait for next year. I've also been looking for a new church home since I recently moved to Canton, and I think I found it. Thank you, Moody, for this amazing conference.
I think you skipped a line there.
No, I didn't.
He said, I got to see my fearless leader, Brian Dolan. He said, I'm not making that up. It's there, Daria. Yeah, I guess you just forgot that part.
I see nothing.
There was another text as well, right, about reflections?
Yeah. During prayer, someone of a different age, much younger than I, and of a different color, put his hand on my shoulder and showed me the love of God.
Yeah, there was a powerful moment at the end where Pastor Maiden asked us to intentionally stand next to someone different from us in some way. And put our arms around each other, and we gathered around the altar. It was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
I do want to continue sharing some of my reflections from the Walkworthy Men's Conference, from the questions that came in to the panel. Again, I've been in ministry for many years, and I don't know that I've ever seen a in-the-moment window into the souls of men like this in my life, where so many questions were submitted with guys struggling, to know why they're struggling, what they're struggling with. And I think Daria's right. It's possible men in the church could be struggling more than most. Now, my friends in Chicago plugged this into ChatGPT for me because I'm an invalid when it comes to that at this point. Didn't even think of doing it. And ChatGPT analyzed all 178 questions and gave us a list of trends and patterns. Here's some of what it said that it saw in all of these questions. Porn addiction remains a significant issue. Not only are men struggling with it personally, but they feel the church is failing to address it.
Yeah, because the church is failing to address it.
Yeah. Yeah. And how about this one? Marriages are under heavy strain. Many men feel disconnected from their wives, either due to communication issues, depression, or loss of love. Another trend in all the questions, a growing frustration with churches. Many men feel churches aren't addressing real-world struggles like sexual addiction, marriage crisis, or evangelism in a secular workplace. Also, how about this one? Men are struggling with emotions, but feel alone in it.
Yeah, bingo.
Whether it's anger, depression, or feeling distant from God, many don't feel safe opening up, especially in Christian circles.
That says a lot.
Doesn't it? I mean, that one in and of itself, it's a heartbreaker. This is why I was sitting there groaning, reading through these questions that had come in. And I think ChatGPT nailed it. Again, men are struggling with emotions but feel alone in it. Whether it's anger, depression, or feeling distant from God, many don't feel safe opening up, especially in Christian circles. In fact, there was one heartbreaking note from a guy that I wanted to share. Here it is. Listen to this. And in this vein, question came in. I'm a 21-year-old struggling with more depression and anxiety than I've ever felt. I just got engaged and feel that I should be filled with joy. Being a follower of Jesus, how can I have more joy in this season of life? Like, he clearly doesn't know where to turn. And he's feeling more depression and anxiety than he's ever felt.
Yeah, and going back to what I was saying earlier, these are deep issues. There's not one answer you can give or one thing you can do, or even maybe even, the top three. You really need to talk to someone. And I think the Bible is clear that we need each other. We need to encourage each other. We need to challenge each other. But we need to do that together. And we're not doing that together. We're relying on going to church and participating or sitting through a service, and that being the extent of our Christian walk. And what we really need to do is to be able to open up to one another. And that's going to take at least one person in your circle, in your group, to be the first.
Yeah, and I think it's also going to take the women in our listening audience who are attached to some guy that went to this conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even not went to this conference, because this is a solid sample group of Christian men in our community. So even if your husband didn't go, or your son or whatever, men are struggling with their emotions. They feel alone, and they don't feel safe opening up.
Yeah.
And you can serve an important role in making an environment for them and creating an environment or an opportunity for them to feel safe. Like, I really think wives and moms and sisters can be a part of this solution.
Oh, absolutely.
Because cultural ideologies and trends tell men to just be quiet about it and suck it up and walk it off. And some of you may be, honestly, creating unsafe environments for your husbands and sons and brothers.
Yeah. What I think would be tremendously healing would be for wives who this is speaking to. Maybe you're wondering, gosh, am I one of those wives that my husband doesn't feel connected to me? Or maybe you know that you've lost that connection.
And he doesn't feel safe talking about it.
He doesn't feel safe talking about it. So what a tremendous gift it would be, a gift of love, to open up your heart and your mouth and say, honey, do we need to talk about this? I'm willing to listen to what you have to say.
And mean it.
And mean it.
I'm not going to get mad at you.
Right. You can, I understand, and wives, you really have to say it kind of like this. I understand that you feel I may be upset with you if you're honest with me about how you feel, but I give you my word that I will do my best not to be upset, not to take whatever you say personally, but to take it as this is something that you are opening up to me about, so I will open up to you about. Because don't wives want their husbands to open up to them?
They say they do.
They say they do. And don't guys usually not open up to their wives?
Yeah.
Yeah, usually.
Because
And
they're
why is
struggling, they feel alone, they don't feel safe opening up.
They don't feel safe opening up.
They told us this. We have the statistical and anecdotal proof for you. Believe it or don't.
Right. And, it's my experience that when you go to other guys with stuff like this, they're like, yeah, I'm struggling with something similar. What can we do? And then that's the end of the conversation.
Yeah, right.
Thanks for watching. Do you need more Ron in your life? Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new video.